Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
All right, let's get started. So this is the agenda for today. First, we will quickly introduce ourselves and then go through some of the core features in UiPath Studio. Then Tracy is going to walk you through a very cool demo to use some of the features that we just talked through. And we are going to have a quick quiz just to recap your memories on the topic that we cover. And then we continue with some of more of the features on data scraping, Excel automation, data table, and data manipulation. Then we go into the next demo and next quiz. All right, without further ado, let's get started. Hello again, my name is Hanh and Nguyen. I'm currently a customer success manager at Ashling Partners. We are a consultancy firm in the United States, and I have been a UiPath MVP for 3 years in a row. I had joined many major and interesting programs from UiPath, and very happy that seeing more and more interest from the communities in RPA technologies. So I'm going to kick over to Tracy to introduce herself.
Hello, my name is Tracy Dixon. I am with Centric Consulting. I am a solution architect and just love to talk to people and companies about automation and getting their time back and not spending their time doing things that are not the most important for their days.
All right, thank you, Tracy. So before we did that into different functionality in UiPath Studio during the session, if you have any questions, feel free to drop it in the chat and any of us will try to answer your questions. Okay, so the first feature we're going to talk about today is the recording tool in UiPath Studio. And before we try to learn what the recording tool can help you with in UiPath Studio, let's do a quick recap on what you learned in session 1. So if you joined session 1, you should have done a automation called Find Your Unicorn Name, where you go into a website and enter your name and the birth month, then you will get your unicorn name. So the website only have one text box, one drop-down list, and one button. Normally, when you want to automate that automation, you open UiPath Studio, find the activity that applicable for the element. Say in this case, you want to type in your name first, then you find the type into activity, and then you will indicate the element on screen. And you will do this for any element on screen. Now imagine the website have more than 3 elements that you have to interact with. Let's say it is an Oracle website or a Salesforce website with multiple fields and buttons. Doing this step manually, one by one, will take you a very long time. So that's why UiPath introduced recording features. In Studio, on the top menu, you can see a recording tool right here. If you click the drop down, you will see the different type of recording. The recording tool will help you automate the workflow much faster. What it does is it records your action on screen, and once you're done, it will automatically generate different activities with the input that you provided. So let's go back to the presentation. And you can see on screen, we have different type of recording tool. The first one is basic recording. What it does is you will use this basic recording when you want to perform a single activity on single window. And the output of the recording is a full selector for each activity. Next one is desktop recording. So very similar to basic recording, you also use it when you want to perform actions against desktop app. But the difference is it's going to generate a container with the list of activity within that container. And you're going to see all the differences between these recordings in more detail in the demo, by the way. So I'm going to walk through just the high level difference between the tools, and so that you understand when you which one you should use in which scenario. The next recording tool is a web recording, and just like the name suggests, you will use this tool whenever you want to automate against a web app or a browser. So the next one is image recording. This option is used whenever you work in a virtualized environment. For example, very often you will work on application that is hosted in Centric environment or virtual machine. Then you will use this recording to automate the action against the app that hosted on the virtualized environment. Now, if in the Centric environment, you have a plugin called Remote Runtime, which allow the application to act as if it is a local application, then you will be able to use native Centric recording. And last but not least, computer vision recording is when you have computer vision in your environment and you want to use computer vision to recognize element on screen without using selector or images. It will use computer vision activity instead. So there are options that can be recorded by the tool. For example, like the type activity, the click activities, and if you need to select some element from the drop-down list, that can be recorded as well. But there are other actions that cannot be recorded. For example, if you need to send a modifier key, like Control-Shift or Control-V or Control-Z, those options cannot be recorded, but you can always pause the recording and capture that action. And to pause the recording, you can click F2, and to escape from the recording, you can hit Escape button. So let me show you real quick. For example, let's delete this one. If I choose web recording, so you will see the menu for web recording right here. And let's say I want to record the action on the file your unicorn name automation. I'll click record button and choose the first element on screen. Now I just type my name, then select my birth month. So you see when I click the activity, it will show the list of options available in that drop-down list. Okay. Then click on get unicorn name. Now I want to capture this name, but I need to pause the recording. Then I will hit F2. You will see a countdown here. Actually, let's escape. So now I have the option to save and exit, but I want to capture the name first. So I will choose copy text and capture my unicorn name. Now I can save and exit. And you can see in UiPath Studio, the recording automatically generates all the activities that I perform on screen. So I don't have to do it manually. And as mentioned before, all the activity is within a container. This is a attached browser container. Okay. Now let's learn about selector. And so we see there are about 6 different types of recording before, where you need to know what type of application that you need to interact with, either a desktop application or a web application or a image or a virtualized environment. In case you don't want to do all of that, you can go with modern experience. So what you do is go inside Studio, go to the project setting, and you see an option for modern design experience right here. you enable this option, it will ask you to reload the project, and that's fine. We just reload it. So after it finished loading, you will see the menu on top change a little bit. And if you have worked in Studio X before, you will see very similar option to Studio X. The purpose of modern experience is just want to make sure that the user experience is more is simplified and more user friendly. Okay, so it's finished loading. You see there's no recording tool on the top anymore. Instead, it just have a app or web recorder and then a computer vision option. So now let's say you want to record the automation that we did earlier and just reload it, everything back to what it was. So the menu is a bit different, but the point is you don't have to identify if you want to use basic desktop or web or native recording. You can just click one option and perform the action. And at the end, it will automatically generate the workflow for you. Okay. So let's talk about selector. What is selector? Selector are identifier that help UiPath recognize the element on screen. So the selector have the address and specific attributes that can help UiPath identify where to find the element on the application. So either a desktop app or a web application or even a document. So every element will have a specific selector, and that's how UiPath can identify, you know, on this screen, for example, where is the name text box, where is the drop down. So each of these elements will have a very specific selector that identify its location and position on the application. Now let's look at what the selector look like in Studio. So let's say we want to check the text box name. If you click on the option right here and click Edit Selector, you can see the selector for the control called text box name. And the type is input. So we know that we can provide an input to that text box. And let's say you want to modify this selector, you can do it right here. For example, right now the text box name, if you click validate and highlight, it will highlight the element on screen for you. But if I change the selector to something else, and you see that the validate button now turns yellow, and it will ask you to validate the selector. Now it cannot find the element because there's no element on screen with the ID text name too. So if I change it back to normal and validate it again, then it can find the element. So you see selector help UiPath recognize where the element is on screen. All right. And same thing, this is the view in modern design. Usually, because I've been working with UiPath Studio for several years already, this view is kind of new to me. So I will switch it back to the regular design. And to do that, very simple. Just go in and toggle that option. Together with selector, we have a concept of UI Explorer. And let's go back here. Usually take about a couple of seconds to reload the project. All right. Let me open the selector window again. So there are two ways that you can access the UI Explorer window. One is if you already have a element capture, then you can open the Edit Selector window and then open UI Explorer window for that particular selector. All right, so this is the UI Explorer. The UI Explorer provides more in-depth on the details of the selector. So for example, on the right-hand side, you can see there's more properties for the selector other than just the ID and the tag. You can select placeholder as well. Placeholder is what is displayed in the text box right here. Okay. And on the left-hand side, you can see other properties that is not usually displayed on screen. And on the top left corner, you will see a visual tree. This display all of the elements that are on this website right now, on this web page. And you can see exactly where the element that you are choosing in this selector, because it will highlight it in the visual tree. So for example, this is the text box name. Right below it should be the drop-down list for the month. So you see this one is the select month element. And then right below it should be the click button. So this visual tree will give you the the order of the element on which element that you can select and automate again on the web application. Now, the second way that you can access this window is just go to the top menu and select UI Explorer. Okay. And right now, because I haven't selected any element yet, everything will be empty. Now you can click Indicate Element button. I'm going to click F2. Okay, and bring back this website and select the element. Now you see that from an empty window, it already generated a selector for the element that I just selected. And then you can modify the selector here. And this is very useful when you want to debug or want to test out the selector for certain element on screen without having to identify the element first in your workflow. So that's two ways that you can access the UI Explorer window. So in selector, we have concept of using wildcard and variable to make the selector more dynamic. So for example, if I go to the selector for the name, and open the UI Explorer, let's just say in the future, the website is not called by unicorn name anymore. And it's a for your dog name, for example. If I change this to either website called by your dog name, and my selector say by your unicorn name, then it will not be able to find the element on screen. But if I know that it can be any animal, then I can change unicorn with a wildcard and validate the element, highlight it. So you see the selector is still able to identify the element on screen, even though I didn't say that this is to find your unicorn name. So with wildcard, you can replace the text in the selector with 0 or many characters. And then there's another wildcard that you can use. So let's say you just want to replace one character, then you can put a question mark here, validate, and it still works. It can still identify the element on screen. And then there's another concept called variable. Let me change it back to what it was. Close it. Okay. I want to use for selector, so that's why I choose a activity on screen and just indicate the element again. So this is just time to cover the difference between for selector and partial selector as well. So you can see that this activity is outside of a container, and the selector for this one, it have the title of the page and the control name as well. Unlike the same activity, but if within a container, you can see that the title of the page is grayed out because the selector is inherited from the container. So if you click on the container and select edit selector, you can see that this is the title of the page, and any element within that container will inherit that parent selector from the container. So within the activity, you cannot edit this gray out part. You can only edit the web control part right here. If you want to edit the parent, you have to go to the parent activity and edit its selector. And it will automatically update the parent for all of the activity within the container. So that's why the selector for the activity is called partial selector. And for the one that is outside the container, you can edit the parent selector inside the selector window as well. So this is called full selector. Now let's talk about variable in selector. Let's just say in the future, you want to dynamically pass in the name of the animal, and you have that name as a variable inside the XAML. Then what you can do is you highlight the text that you want to replace with a variable and select a variable name. So let me first create a variable first. To do that, you go to the variable menu, right at the bottom, and let's just say this is animal name. And you can replace unicorn with the animal variable. In the drop down, you will see all of the variable available within the workflow. Confirm. So now you can dynamically pass in the animal name using a variable, and it will automatically update all the selector in your XAML that use this variable with the animal name. All right. So we cover wildcard in selector and using variable. So let's put that into practice. I'm going to pass it over to Tracy to show you some demo.
Hi, everyone. I just put a link out in the chat. If any of you want to walk through step by step, you can download the actual files from the forum. There's a link there out to GitHub. Give me just a moment to pull these up on screen. And we're actually, it's pretty common. One of the first things you often automate is the login of a website or an application, that type of thing. It's one of the initial first things that you do pretty often. So that's what we're going to demonstrate for you here. Is the right screen showing? I can't tell what it is. And so do you see Studio? Hannah, are you able to see my accurate screen with
Yeah.
Studio? Okay, good. All right. And one of the common things, it's actually just throwing an error. So I figured I'd mention this because it's not uncommon at all. You might see an error once in a while that says that that the system can't communicate with the UiPath extension. This can happen sometimes if you have multiple profiles in Chrome, which I'm sure many of us do. The only thing that you need to do in that circumstance is just to close out and reopen. I know sometimes I have maybe work in business or my kid's profile up, that type of thing. As long as you close it out and reopen it, that'll normally clear that error. So it's not anything to worry about. If it's persistent, then you can pretty easily just reinstall the add-in if you find that it doesn't go away. But I rarely have to do that. So this is the login sequence using some of the things that you guys just learned. And I don't know how many of you guys have played around with your environment, your studio environment, but you may have noticed that all of the things over here, these different panels and windows over to the side, these you can customize to your liking. You may properties you'll certainly use regularly because you have to configure each of these activities, but you might want to hide things. You might want to drag things to the other side, that type of thing. So feel free to do that if that works best for you. I know normally I'd like to have several listed here, but like the error list, typically I don't need to have in this panel with everything else. So I'll click that, which will make it appear over here to the right since I don't use it as frequently, for example. And you can do that on either side. This folder button is very handy because it is the file explorer to the files on your computer. So you can actually see all of the underlying files that are here and look and see, move things around, rename things as needed, that type of thing. You can see where they're located on your machine. So here's the sequence that we're going to walk through. The end result should be that we can log into the UiPath forum with the username and password that we've got set here. So the first thing that we're doing, the first activity is that application for the Chrome browser here. We've given the URL. I'll make this a little bit wider. forum.uipath.com. Now, even though the URL is here, if we were not opening and going to that website, say it was already open for us, you don't need to specify the URL. So because we are opening it here, we specify that. And then the selector makes sure that it picks the right thing. So say our browser previously had something open still. Whenever it opens, maybe that website would be open. We need to make sure to specify that it's the UiPath forum so it doesn't get confused if there may be several tabs. So that's first. And then within that, this is called a scope. Within that Chrome scope for the UiPath forum, we'll want to click the login button. So let's walk through step by step. So we'll click step 2 and that'll get us started. And now notice it changed from the properties here naturally to output. We can close that at the top. And I'm going to step until we get to this. All right, I'm going to click until we get to click login button. Now, it's tiny because apparently I had something really small open the last time. And sometimes the window may appear behind other screens, that type of thing. So make sure to keep an eye on it. It's not always the first thing on top. So we can see that that did happen successfully. And I'm going to move this over to the right and move the studio over to the left. You can do that by clicking the Windows button and left, and then for Chrome, it'll automatically make the other half of Chrome to the right, so you can see both on screen at the same time. You can also make the items a little bit smaller to your liking as well. So now within this window, we've told it to click the login button. So we'll step into that here. And you can see, I don't know if you guys can see that up at the top or not. It shows that login button there at the top. And so now, because the whole, the page changed, we need to provide a different scope. So these overall scopes are the screen that we're telling it to look at in order to find all of the elements or to do the activities. So now that the screen's changed, we specify the different screen. So you see the sign-in screen mentioned here. I'm going to click through that. And then we've got the login steps entered here. So this should click continue with email. That's what we would expect here. And then it should type in the email. I think LastPass is defaulting as something else, but it should type in something different here. And the password. And there's a couple of different ways to go about doing passwords. You can add them to the credential manager if you're just automating locally with Windows. You could also put them in Orchestrator. And there's some other tools besides that, but those are the two most frequently used. And then it completed that last step of clicking the sign in button. And then the last item that we have here is for it to go directly to unread topics. So we're not just logging into the forum, but we're jumping to the unread topics to see if there's some recent things that we should catch up on. And so again, with the screen change, we want to make sure to change that overall, the scope activity again. And now within that scope, it should be looking for the unread link, which the different, that number of unreads would change each time. So it's looking for that word unread, and then that number can vary within the parentheses. And that's it. That's the completion. Now, if you look in the object repository, all of these items are set and reusable. So I've got everything specified here, unread topics, that button, the forum homepage, the sign-in screen, and all of the elements that were clicked here, and then the forum landing page. All of that's reusable. We know those elements all worked here. And so we don't have to go specify all of that if we were to need to automate any of those things in the future. In something else, we wouldn't have to start from scratch. We could save those as part of the object repository and make those part of the library and use them all again. Any questions? Anything, Hannah, that you see that we need to cover further?
Yeah, I think, Tracy, maybe it would be useful if you can just walk through how to download the project from the link you share.
Sure. All right. So the link was actually to pull up that link directly. The link is in the forum, and then the bottom entry here. is this set of files. It's the same thing I have on the screen in the background. And then there are two different automations. The one that I just went through is UiPath Forum. So I believe you should be able to download zip here. So this Women in Automation zip, I believe, should have a folder with both. Yeah. So if you go to code and download zip, that's your easiest method. It makes a folder called Women in Automation Master, and then you've got a folder that has all of those files in it.
So Tracy, there's another question about, can you elaborate more on object repo?
Sure. So the object repository didn't exist a few years ago. That's part of the modern experience. This is a place that you can, it's like a library of objects. So once you figure something out, like a screen or an object, you can store it there like a book on a shelf, and then go back and pull it out anytime that you need to interact with that screen or that object. You can also, so you list the application here. That's what this plus button is for. That the first thing you do is select the application. And so here I did UiPath Forum, and then you add each screen, and you can add elements. They even make it easy. You could add all of the elements on the screen at one time. It will enter all of them at the same time for you. And then whenever you need to interact with one, you can drag and drop, and it will ask how you want to interact with it, like a click or a typing into it or that type of thing. Are there any specific questions on the object repository? The whole idea of it is to save you time next time. So instead of having to specify all of the activities or to, even if I want to do something different, say the email field, instead of typing into it, next time I want to click on it, instead of having to start from scratch on that, I'm able to pull that same element back and interact with it a different way because I've got it stored from previous. So this object repository can be saved and reused in the future, even independently from the rest of the activities. Other questions?
I think that's all. All right. Thank you, Tracy.
Sure.
Let me share my screen. So we have about 45 minutes left for the second portion of the session. Before we go into the next part, let's do a quick quiz to recap what we have been talking through today. Okay. So on the screen, you will see a link, menti.com. If you go to that link and enter the code on screen, you will be able to join the quiz. I'm going to give it a few seconds for everybody to navigate to that website and use that code to access the quiz, and then we can start. All right, looks like some people already are able to access the quiz. So if you have any issues or any question on how to access this, just drop your question in the chat, okay? Let's wait for a few more people. We have 37 people on this call.
What's our quiz link?
I
Put on the,
can copy the string,
oh, there
the
it is.
link. Yeah.
On the other screen.
This is the link. And or you can do this. Yeah, the link and the code is in the chat. Okay, I think we have enough people. Let's start it. So the question will appear on screen and you have 15 seconds to give an answer, to select the answer on your phone or on your laptop. Looks like a few people are joining as well. So I'll give it 5 more seconds. Okay, let's start it. All right. Which recording tool is recommended for web applications? So you have option 1 is basic recording, second is Chrome, third one is web, and the last one is computer vision. 18 people already answer. And yeah, most of you answer correctly. Basic recording is only recommended for when you have just one single activity and you want to capture the full selector for that activity. And we don't have a recording called Chrome. Computer vision is only suitable when you want to record action on a application that you will not be able to use a native selector. And so the correct answer is web recording. Let's see who answered the fastest. So congratulations, Ripim. I'm sorry if I butchered your name. That was very good. All right. We will have another quiz after this session, so make sure you follow along. So next topic we're going to cover today is data scraping. So we talk about recording tool to capture element on screen. We capture text box and collect activities. So we know how to interact with the screen. But what if you want to scrape some data on the website or on a desktop application or even in a document? So UiPath have a tool called data scraping, or if you are using modern design, it's called table extraction. So let's say I have this website here where I can provide a vendor code and check the inventory for that vendor. And now I want to extract this table from the website and use the data from the table. So in UiPath, you will see on the top menu. Let me see if I can hide this. Okay. Because I'm using classic design, so it's called data scraping. And Tracy is going to walk through this exercise later, so maybe I will skip the demo part. Basically, you will follow along the option on screen and capture the table. So how do you use data scraping, the output from data scraping? Let's cover that. So it is very related to the next tab automation called Excel automation. So Excel is one of the most popular word product that I'm sure everybody on this call here have been using it at one point or used to using it on a daily basis. So usually you, when you use Excel, you either want to create a report or check report or just fill out some data. So similarly, UiPath have Excel automation features that can help you automate these day-to-day activities. So in UiPath Studio, if you go to Activity panel and go to App Integration, you will see Excel application, and here it lists out all of the activity that you can do in Excel using UiPath. And this slide will is a recap of these activities that you saw in UiPath Studio. So other than the basic function like read and write data, filter and modifying the data, you can also run macro script in Excel file as well. So in Excel automation, often you will choose activity in Excel application scope or workbook. So this is Excel activity. If you want to use workbook, let's see. This is still Excel. So for Excel activity, you need to have a Excel application scope first, and then all of the activity within that Excel scope will lie under that scope. For workbook, let's see. For workbook, you don't have to use an Excel application scope, and you can provide the file path for the file and then the sheet name. So in this case, for example, you want to read a range in a spreadsheet. If you are using Excel application scope, then you have to put the scope first and then drag the activity for the Excel file inside that scope. But if you are using workbook, you don't have to use a scope and just provide basically the same requirement for the file path and the sheet name. So what are the difference between these two, and when should you use which one? So for Excel application scope, you need to have Excel installed on the machine. And for workbook, you don't have to have Excel installed. So that's one difference. The other one is for Excel activity. You can see earlier, we have more activity available under App Integration, Excel. So you can run execute macro if you are using Excel application scope. But if you are using workbook, this option is not available. And there's many more different between Excel activities and workbook activities. But we are not going to deep dive into that today. As you're doing more exercise and training on UiPath Academy, you will learn more about different activities and differences between Excel and workbook activities. But the key to remember is using Excel application scope. You need to have Excel installed on the machine. And usually Excel application scope can be faster in some case if you are doing many activities within the same workbook. So data table, after you read the data from an Excel file or an Excel sheet, you need to store the data in a variable so that you can use it. And the variable type for storing data from Excel spreadsheet is called data table. And very similar to how you use Excel, data table will allow you to look through each record in your spreadsheet, feature the data, sort the data, add or modify the data. And you can see on screen, these are the activities that you can use. Data manipulation is the process through which you can alter the data in the data table. So action like deleting a record, modifying the record, or reformatting the data table is some common action in data manipulation. And Tracy is going to demo of the topic that we just covered in data scraping, data table, and data manipulation in this exercise. So I'm going to pass it over to you, Tracy.
All right, thank you. Okay, are you able to see my screen okay?
Yes.
Perfect. So you guys will note in Studio up at the top, you have this handy little wizard called data scraping. You also have screen scraping up here. So this is what you want to use whenever you have a large amount of information that looks kind of like a table. And you can try it out regardless. If it looks like a lot of information, regardless of format, you can always try the tool and see how well it grabs information. But when there are a lot of fields, it's far easier to try to grab a whole table of info than it would be to try to get one piece of information at a time or to grab a lot of different elements separately. It's usually the easiest way to go about things. So in this case, we just picked a random website and we chose Yahoo cryptocurrency. So I'll walk you guys through that. And so again, just like before, we'll step through the same thing that we did before, the same way we did before. And then I'll show you how we created this, because this is actually really brief. It's just the web page, the scopes that we talked about before. It extracts the table, which is just a selector for the table on the page that's going to open up. And then it'll output into right here into this area, the data table. It'll log it so we can see all of the data that it scraped from the web for us. So first, let's get to the web page that we want to start scraping. So by getting to that screen, it should open it for us. It opened on the other screen, so I'm going to pull it over here. So this was just a totally random website. You don't have to actually pick the same website. You could pick any that you like, but we figured we'd pick something with a decent amount of data that we could pull. And this is the table that's on that website. All right, so now that we're within that scope, the selector, and I'll show you guys after this, all it does is specify the table on the page. There wasn't a whole lot to it. So we'll step into that, and this was actually recorded. You can see the recording sequence there. We're going to extract the table. I'll go back to the output screen here. We could filter it to something in particular if we wanted, even if you pull in all of the information on screen, that filter activity could let us choose a particular, if we wanted to look at just Bitcoin or just the items that were negative or something like that, we could do that. Here's the output. This takes a data table, which is what, whenever you pull in the information, it goes into data table format. We're going to take that data table and put it into text format so we can see the contents easily here, because text is what outputs to this log. And then the last step is to log. So you can see that grabbed a whole lot of information really fast from the screen. So this is the contents of that table. You can see why it's so much easier for robots to do stuff like read information from a page than it is for us as human beings, because it read all of that at one time, where we could, it take us a really long time to read through all of that individually. So all of that information is gathered from that table. And you could, if you wanted to get more sophisticated, this is just a super simple data scraping activity. Now you could manipulate this. You could decide to delete some columns or do something further, whatever you wanted, really output it to Excel, put it into Word, send an email about it, all of those things. But that's all there is to it. Now, in order to try out data scraping, all you do is click the data scraping wizard, and the wizard actually walks you through everything. So you can see it's looking for something that we want to scrape. And it's looking for just one piece. All it's trying to gather is an element of anything to be scraped. And you can just scrape one piece of things. But typically, if you scrape any element of a table, you'll see a pop-up that says something like this. You selected a table cell. Would you like to extract the data from the whole table? And so that's up to you. You don't have to extract it all. You could just extract a few cells. But in this case, we're going to put yes. And you can see the results of the extract. It's usually pretty great at setting everything up. We just had a couple of clicks. There was very little that we had to do. And behind the scenes, if you look at the data definition, it's got stuff back here. You can get more sophisticated with this. If you know some of the details of how to set this up, you could name the columns and do stuff further with this. If you know how to set up the metadata for a table. You can put in the maximum number of results. If you wanted to limit that, say you only wanted up to 500 rows, you could do that as well. You can also set it up to look at multiple pages. If you wanted it even to press like a next button and look at page after page up until the full data is brought in, that's also possible. And you can sample everything here. Maybe it missed a column, that type of thing. You could add in additional columns if you wanted more, that type of thing. And so we'll finish here. And then here's where you could specify whether or not there are multiple pages. And we see that there are, in this case, there's a next. And so we're going to say yes. And click next for the question that it asked. And it'll actually give the link for the next. And that means that whenever we go scrape that information, it'll pull in information from multiple pages. If we so choose. If we indicated that, it'll pull from as many pages as it finds up until that limit. So I'll pause here. Any questions on data scraping? This wizard is actually really great and does nearly all of the work for you. I don't know that it just works for structured data. No, not necessarily. So I've used it on things like Teams on the web, where I don't know that it's necessarily structured data. I try to treat it as such. It does put it into a data table, but there are some things like the calls history, where some fields, some rows had values, some didn't, some missed calls didn't have records. I don't even know that that's really a table beneath it, but I wanted to try to make it treat it that way. So I think it makes its best effort, whether or not it's structured data, and it will absolutely let you pick and choose elements. It does not have to be the whole table. You can just select certain pieces of it. So I don't know whether you would consider that structured data. But typically it's your best bet if you have multiple things that you're trying to grab. I don't know that it would necessarily be efficient to just get one element at a time. You could just use the normal object repository for that. Other questions?
Since we still have time, Tracy, maybe you can show how to use the data table activity after we extract the data table.
All right, so we can, if you type in data or table, you'll see this list of activities, and there are actually a whole bunch more behind this. I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with the marketplace, but the marketplace is the UiPath area where a lot of us have spent some time doing figuring out some type of activity or procedure already. And when we have, we'll throw something out on the marketplace so everybody else can benefit from that too. I know my friend Valeriba has some really great data table activities that I personally use that are totally free. And so I figure, you know, why in the world recreate the wheel if I don't have to? So I use some of his also that really create even more capabilities than there are already in this list. So I know he's got several out here. So they list the additional functionality that you might be looking for. Like he has dictionary to data table or showing the data table, all kinds of stuff out here. But you can specify data table out here and find even more capabilities than what you've got out here already. Just as far as stuff that is built in. Aside from that, you can use these and you can also manipulate these in any way. So the typical thing that you do after grabbing information from a table is to review each row in some way. So this is the most typical activity. So once you've output a data table like this, you would take the table itself here, you'd have a row, and then you would do something like, you know, calculate a value from some of the information in there. So the way that you would reference a column, here, I'll make this a little bit bigger. It's on the other screen. So the way that you would reference a value is like this. It's that row and the item, and then this would be the column name or the column number. Typically you would put the name. So and the most often, like in this case, it likely made things the name of the column that's here. So say our first column is probably name. This is how we would reference that and would typically need to add something like that. This is how we would reference that column from then on out. So we could look at that value and then we could assign it to a variable. We could review that and say, if the name is this, if it's Bitcoin, then do that. So that would be a pretty common scenario to perform specific actions based on that. So let's do that. Let's perform a specific action. So for me, whenever I have some type of conditional logic, I always set out and write a note about what I'm going to do before I do it to make sure that I'm doing the right thing. So let's say if the cryptocurrency is Bitcoin, then set the Bitcoin flag to true. And then cryptocurrency is not Bitcoin, so Bitcoin flag is false. All right, so let's copy what we had earlier. This is going to be the name of the currency. And it looks like it's going to be Bitcoin USD. So that should tell us whether or not the currency is Bitcoin. So now, if this is true, we can create a variable called Bitcoin flag. Just reuse this down here. Yeah, you want to make sure that the scope of the variable is where you can see it. A lot of times it'll default to just this area. And you often want to use it in a larger scope where you want to use it later in the procedure. So equals true. You also want to make sure that you change the display name on each activity so they're unique. So the reason that you do that, if you're ever debugging and it stops on a procedure, you want to be able to see the name of that activity. And if it's the same name, if it's log message, just like everything else, then you're not going to be able to distinguish that activity from others. So I typically will take out anything like extra sequences, review, weather, Bitcoin. I always like to make these unique so I can find the exact place where something had an issue if there was an issue. So now it would review all of these rows, and if that row was Bitcoin, it's going to set the Bitcoin flag to true. And then we could also do setting it to, it will naturally be false. But because that variable persists, we don't want it to be true from the prior run and then hold the value previously. So we'll have it set to false here too. So any questions on any of that?
Then that's all the questions. I think we are right on time for the next quiz.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Tracy.
Sure.
Okay. Going to share my screen. And we are ready for quiz number 2. Same thing, you will access the link and the code that we share. I'm going to drop the link in the chat. So let's wait for a few more people joining. I have 15 people so far. And same thing, once the quiz starts, you will have 15 seconds to choose the correct answer. So the quiz question will appear when I hit enter. Okay. Let's go ahead and start then. Which option below is not a data manipulation operation? The first one is sorting, second is deleting, third one is modifying, and lastly, graphing. So which one is not a data manipulation operation? We have 15 answers so far. Okay, all right, most people answer correctly. So if you remember, data manipulation is a process that we alter the data in a data table. So sorting, deleting, and modifying the data are some common data manipulation. We don't have a manipulation action called graphing for data table. So almost everybody answered correctly. Let's see who answered the fastest. Oh, wow. So Samini, you're the winner on both rounds of the quiz. Congratulations. I think this marks the end of the session. So what next after you finish the training from UiPath in this Women in Automation series? So as Christina shared earlier, you can go to UiPath Academy. And if you want to learn more about the material covered in this course, you can go to Learning by Role and RPA Developer Foundation course. The topic for recorder, selector, data table, data scraping, Excel automation are covered in the RPA Developer Foundation course on Academy. And as always, if you have any question, you can post it on UiPath forum. So Christina, is there anything else you want to cover?
Yes, I just want to make sure forum, yes, you can ask all your questions in forum, but also I have placed in the chat the dedicated forum thread we have open for you. So it's actually a forum category. You can place your questions following this training there, and we will let the MVP know, so you'll get like focused support on that thread. Make sure you save that thread which is in the chat. I will repaste it now in case you guys didn't catch it. So this is the forum thread for you to get support. And I think maybe Han, if they have any Q&A questions, like to open up a bit now Q&A, if someone wants to ask any question, you can unmute yourselves.
Sure. I'll stop sharing my screen. Let's see. Yeah, if you have any question, you can just unmute yourself.
This is what I placed in chat now is your support thread for dedicated support thread on forum. And also you have the office hours for tomorrow link. So please join also this session in case you want help, direct help. So this will be an interactive session where the trainers will help you directly with any problems you might have encountered during your practice, your academy courses. So don't be afraid to register and just come and troubleshoot the problems with them. Yes, you have the link for the event there. And for this session, you will also receive tomorrow the deck and the recording on email, and it will also be posted on the event link. And now let's see who has any questions from the audience.
Yeah, to answer Priya's question about how to find projects to practice the building automation end-to-end, on the UiPath Academy, if you learn by role, you will see there's a couple courses for RPA developer, and you can take from the very basic one like RPA Foundation to a more advanced one like RPA developer courses. They will have use case and requirement for you to build the automation step by step. And at the end, you also have a solution file so that you can compare your solution with the solution delivered by UiPath. So you can learn by that way. And if you're serious about career in RPA development, I would highly suggest going through all of the courses. And once you feel confident, you can take the RPA developer, advanced RPA developer certificate from UiPath. That should give you a good start into a career in UiPath. Yeah, if you have a question on the forum that you didn't get an answer, can you drop the link to the question in the chat? And Tracy and I will follow up on that.
You want to go ahead and unmute and ask your question on the Amazon data scraping? And if not, feel free to type it or to post it in the forum either way.
I think she's trying to use data scraping to scrape off the product and pricing from Amazon.com. And not sure if you're having any issues or just how to do it in general. So if you can specify the issues or the question that you have regarding
Hi.
that automation, that would be helpful.
Hi, Anna. Hi, can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, Hanh.
Yeah. So I was currently doing a project on data scraping, and I was trying to get a list of products from Amazon and getting the price and the name of the product. So when I was doing the list format, it was okay. It was working properly. When I'm doing the grid format, I'm having a lot of difficulty because the position of the product name and the price is differing in each format. Like, for example, like shoes is different, shampoo is different. So is like I use selectors and I use wildcard, everything I did, but I'm still struggling.
So is it a different number of columns, or what's the issue exactly?
List of products from Amazon.com website.
Right.
So it's not in a tabular format. It's like a list, and there are two formats, right? One is grid and one is list.
Mm-hmm.
So when I'm doing a data scraping recording for a list format, I'm able to do it. But for grid format, I'm having some difficulty.
And you need both formats?
Yeah, like, is there something I need to be aware of, something I'm missing? Like, I've used selectors and I've changed the code, but it doesn't work for every product. It works for few products. It doesn't work for all the products.
I think we probably have to see the specific scenario and have you share your screen and show us in order to help you.
Or then maybe we can do it in tomorrow's session, right?
Sure.
Yeah, that would be more advisable. This is
Yeah,
sounds
because
like a
tomorrow
case
we
for
have a
office hours.
session. Yeah, tomorrow we have a session for this, right?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, so I don't know that you necessarily can universally like use the same exact selector for everything. Just because it happens to be on the same web page. I know I've found that, you know, it's not going to get 100% of everything. There's no assumption that, you know, all items will be in the same format. There can be variability. But happy to help and see what we can get to.
Right. Thank you.
Sure.
Thanks.
Anyone else wants to ask a question to Tracy or to Hanh?
Yeah. So Aruna, I'm going to drop a link where there's already a tutorial on how to scraping data from Amazon.com and similar shopping websites. So you may find it useful. Just check it out, and of course, you can go to the session tomorrow with more detailed questions. And you can look at the code as well.
Hi, I have a question, Anna, following with what Aruna was mentioning. Let's say we're trying to loop in the same Amazon website, so different products. So let's say for the first product is I'm searching from cookery items, that is displaying in the grid format. And then, and for the second search, it would be like a footwear, but it is displaying in a list format. How can we scrape the data if they're two separate formats of data being represented on the website? How can you scrape it?
This is the project I'm doing currently. So I'm doing the same thing.
Okay.
So just trying to put a if condition. And yeah, that's pretty confusing with what I'm doing.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Okay, I think we can close the session for today. And see you tomorrow in the office hours. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Han. Thank you, Tracy, very much. And we'll see you again tomorrow. Meanwhile, don't forget about the forum thread. We'll watch it, so you will get answers. Don't worry. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everyone.